Welcome to DT Kane's Epic Fantasy Book Club. I'm DT Kane, author of the epic fantasy series The Acktus Saga and the spoken books Uprising. Each week, I read from one of my novels, discuss my writing process, answer your questions, and have general discussions about fantasy fiction. It's like a book club, except I do all the work for you. Find show notes, info about all my novels, and much more at dtkane.com. Here's the show. Hello everyone, welcome back to DT Kane's Epic Fantasy Book Club. Today is Sunday, September 18th, 2022, as I record this, which is episode 9 of season 2 of the podcast, and episode 36 overall. Let's see, obviously the big news this week is Declaimer's Stand is finally out and available for purchase. Always exciting to send another one of my creations out into the world. I hope everyone who has started reading it already is enjoying it, and you can run over to Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Kobo or Google Play Books or various other places where you get ebooks or physical books to pick up a copy of your own as well if you like. Link in the show notes. But hopefully everyone enjoys part 4 of the spoken books Uprising, which of course we'll be reading I guess sometime next year, probably as the podcast rolls on, reading through the spoken books Uprising. Other than that, kind of a tiring week for me. Was traveling for work all week, giving some training to some of my company's offices downstate. So it was a good trip. Saw a lot of people I haven't seen in a while, really since before the old pre-COVID days. But glad to be home now, and I think I'm finally getting caught up on some sleep, and I am looking forward to working on a couple of smaller projects before starting my draft of part 5 of the spoken books Uprising in a few weeks. And of course, as the weeks roll on here, I'll have more details about that, but I'm planning on writing another short story in my Temporal Operations Militia universe. That first story is now out on my Patreon account if you're interested in giving that a read. Kind of like I said, kind of field medics for the space-time continuum. If that sounds interesting to you, you can go give that a whirl over on Patreon, patreon.com/dtkane. Okay, I think that's it for the personal updates here. So why don't we just get into the meat of the episode? No analysis, or excuse me, all analysis this week. No narration. This week we'll pick up with the beginning of part 2 of Declaimer's Discovery next week when we read chapter 11. This week we'll just be discussing what we've read on the previous couple of episodes, which is chapters 8 through 10 of Declaimer's Discovery. So starting off with chapter 8, it picks up immediately after chapter 7, which is the last chapter we analyzed a few weeks ago. Chapter 7, if you'll recall, is where Baz met all of the snakes in their underground kind of chamber. He learned about their plan to poison the water supply to kind of kill some readers, but also obviously that would kill other people just besides readers, and Baz talked them out of that, or at least got them to delay their plan by telling them he was going to Fortune and that there was a weapon there that he was going to find that could help them in their apparent rebellion. So that just sets the stage. So on to chapter 8, kind of right off the bat, we learn a few facts about Baz's journey here. So the round trip time from erstwhile to Fortune and back is nearly a month by itself, so the snakes have said they'll delay their plan to poison the water by 30 days, but that's not really going to be enough time, is it? If it's if it takes 30 days to just to travel to and from Fortune, plus Baz, has to stay for this Congress that Deliritus has been invited to, and he also has to search for the Declaimer's Transcendence. So 30 days, not enough time here. So Baz is going to have to figure out how to deal with that. Also, the City of Fortune is apparently much larger than erstwhile. I think Baz notes that he's heard Liamina Library alone is almost as large as the entire city of erstwhile. A city unto itself, Baz tells us. So he really is kind of searching for a needle in a haystack here. And a quick aside, Liamina Library, where does that name come from? Well, you may recall from Book 1 that Liamina Fortune was one of the 3 great scribes, along with the Enigma, who founded the city of Enigma, which we have not visited yet, though you do get to visit it in Declaimer's Stand, Part 4 of the Spoken Books Uprising, which just released this week. So the Enigma, and Halifax Erstwhile was the other scribe, obviously the founder of the city of Erstwhile. So Liamina Library, which is the library that Duke Farston is from, was founded by the founder of the City of Fortune, who was also one of the 3 scribes. So an important library in Fortune, to be sure, and a giant one, just kind of emphasizing the tall task Baz has in front of him here. But just jumping back into the action for a minute here, the snakes are closing out their meeting, and apparently they always close it out by lighting a fire, because fire binds all, according to Scrivnik scriptures that Ogs seems, he likes to quote these Scrivnik sayings, apparently. But fire binds all, so they light a fire at the end of each meeting to kind of remind themselves that they are all united in this cause. But interesting, they don't just burn sticks and wood in this fire. Ogs has a spoken book, and he rips a page out of it and tosses it into the fire, much to Baz's chagrin. Right? He's, despite obviously not really liking readers, Baz has spent his entire life being taught that you kind of treat spoken books like holy relics, so it's a bit sacrilegious to see the snakes here ripping pages out of one and burning them, but just really symbolic of the rebellion they want to start. They are stomping on tradition here, or stomping on the things that readers prize most by ripping pages out of books. Also interesting too, you might recall from chapters 6 and 7, they called Baz a page ripper a few times, which in this society is certainly an insult. You don't want to be ripping pages, but it's maybe gives you a bit of a different perspective on that name now, seeing that the snakes do in fact rip pages out of books. So probably they were still intending it as an insult against Baz earlier, but maybe not entirely. Maybe more of a term of endearment, or more of like a name you call someone when they're annoying you, but you don't actually dislike them. So just a little interesting detail there for the observant reader. Also, just really quick, we see Baz is not really good with the ladies, right? We got Anel, who is kind of the female of the group here. She's been skeptical of Baz, but now she kind of, I guess apparently the rebels in Fortune are known for kind of lewd dancing, apparently, at their meetings. And she kind of shakes her hips at Baz, and Baz just, he kind of splutters, denying that he has any interest in dancing when he sees that. So just a little character detail about Baz there, but he's certainly not a ladies' man. Doesn't seem he's ever really had the opportunity to really get close with anyone of the opposite sex there. And I don't know, we do know he has this apparently budding relationship with Lyanna, though that has all of its own baggage, giving Lyanna's place in society. But we'll see if that becomes any more relevant here as we move on. We also see what these leather pouches are all about. We saw that the snakes, at least several of them, have these leather pouches strung around their necks. And Munch, who is Og's brother, kind of scoops it into the barrel once the fire's gone out and fills it with some ashes before he runs away. And we learn, well, we don't learn this till the end of the chapter, but that's a symbol that you are a member of this organization. If you've got the ashes of a burned spoken book in your pouch, that signifies that you are a member of the Snakes, which is a bit of a, and I made up the part about burning books, but this is another inspired by the Haitian slave revolution. Some of them did carry little, they're called fetishes into battle, but just little objects or symbols, for luck, or some had religious connotations, but very, very loosely inspired by that real life thing here. All right, so after the meeting of the Snakes breaks up, Ogs takes Baz through the tunnel that apparently leads to Torchsire Library. And Baz is having some conflicting feelings here. We get a bit of his inner monologue as he's trailing behind Ogs. On the one hand, he doesn't, he still doesn't even really believe he'll find the Declaimer's transcendence when he goes to Fortune, and he's kind of down, a little morose, not really surprising. Baz is often morose here, right? But he's going on, what's the point of the rebellion? Or really of a rebellion, any rebellion? Without the ability to read, Baz tells us, speakers are just a lot of impoverished nothings. But on the other hand, he does acknowledge that despite that, he felt bad for the Snakes, and that's why he has made this promise to bring back the quote weapon, which is really the Declaimer's transcendence. He just doesn't want to tell them exactly what it is that he's looking for. And he doesn't want to see a bunch of killing either. He doesn't want the Snakes to die, but he also sees some injustice in killing even some of the readers. I think, and Og says, you're not what I expected, Baz. I guess hearing all these stories coming out about Baz, they form a certain opinion of him, and Ogs was clearly thinking that Baz was going to be more of a rabble rouser than he is, and he was obviously surprised that Baz wasn't immediately excited at the prospect of poisoning a bunch of readers. But Ogs points out, maybe you want to keep breathing, Baz, because that's Baz's response to everything, right? He's just worried about staying alive himself. But Ogs tells us, well, but you want others to keep breathing, too. Sorry for that slight interruption there. Had some sirens driving past the window there, so I figured I would pause it so you didn't have to listen to that. But right, so Ogs, just to reiterate, Ogs says, you want others to keep breathing too, Baz. You're not just about mindless killing, and Ogs even admits that sometimes he has trouble seeing past just his desire to get revenge against the readers. And this also touches on, it's a tough question, right? Really, is killing ever the answer? I think Baz, maybe subconsciously wants to think he has the high ground here over the Snakes, but he kind of realizes that what he had to do out in the wilds of part 1 maybe isn't too different from what the Snakes are planning here. Baz killed a couple people during the Acktus Trials. He killed Hellar's harbor with that shadow spell to save Deliritus, and then maybe he didn't lift the sword that ended up killing Marla, but he led Marla out onto the peninsula beneath Tome, fully knowing that something bad was going to happen to her out there, but he'd had to act. He didn't really have a choice, and that seems to be how Ogs feels here too. His rebels can't just sit around any longer while they watch these injustices from the readers continue to pile up. So, Baz is certainly conflicted here. He sees the evil in killing, no matter what the justification, but he can also kind of understand the position as Ogs is in, because Baz has been in such a position himself in the past. And I think Ogs realizes too that Baz is maybe getting on a bit of a, getting on a bit of a high horse here. Don't get all Xavier Tower on me. And I don't know, maybe that was too much of a stretch of an idiom for this world. But like I said, I didn't want to use high horse because that's kind of a cliche from our world. But don't get all Xavier Tower on me. Xavier Tower is the tallest building in erstwhile. So if you're getting Xavier Tower on someone, you're getting high and mighty, right? That's what Ogs is telling Baz not to do. I don't know if anyone got that besides me, but that's what that meant. We also see Ogs kind of respects Baz here. Baz basically accuses Ogs of encouraging murder, and Ogs stops and kind of pokes him in the chest. And asks him, is what you said back there true about a weapon in fortune? And Baz kind of has this cold moment of realization, like, he could just leave me. He could just kill me and leave me here in the tunnels. No one would ever know. But despite that, Baz tells the truth. He's not certain that there is actually anything in fortune, which turns out to be the right answer, right? Because Ogs actually seems to respect that, and he tells Baz, well, okay, I'll do what I can to delay us for longer than a month. I don't know if Oaks comes around and says it, but I'm sure he knows that a month probably is not long enough to get to and from fortune, though he does have the caveat that, well, that's subject to what the All-Seeing One has to say. If the All-Seeing One comes down, who we still don't know who this All-Seeing One is, at least at this point in Chapter 8. But he can override me, so I'll do what I can for you, though, Baz. So finally, we get to the end of the tunnel. Apparently, there's just a big shelf in front of the tunnel that's blocking it from view if you're on the other side in the Torchsire sub-basement, which, maybe makes you wonder a little how no one has found it to this point, though we have seen multiple references that readers don't really go down into the sub-basement. That's where they throw their blinded speakers, so maybe not too much of a stretch to think that the readers don't know about this hidden tunnel down there. But regardless, they get there, and Baz and Ogs part ways. So Ogs gives Baz his own leather pouch and explains how you become one of the snakes, as we talked about earlier. Fill this up with the ashes of a burnt spoken book, and you'll be part of the club. But what makes you think I want to join the snakes, Ogs? Well, Ogs has a good comeback to that, right? You followed a stranger around half of erstwhile at the mere suggestion of causing some trouble for the readers. Baz doesn't have much of a response to that. And he does take the pouch, right? He thinks about just tossing it away, but at the end of the chapter, he shoves it into a pocket. So, obviously, for all his expressed reservations, Baz is not totally writing off the prospect of joining a rebellion against the readers. Because I think, like Ogs says, Baz sees, Baz understands there's something wrong here, right? And maybe Baz hasn't accepted yet that he can actually do something about it, but he clearly has his own innate sense of right and wrong. So maybe even if it's still a little bit below the surface of Baz's consciousness, he's not just going to throw away this opportunity to perhaps rise up against the readers, even though he maybe has not totally accepted for himself yet that he is going to join. All right, so that kind of leads us right into Chapter 9, which again just picks up the action right where we left off in 8. Baz enters a sub-basement. It does take time to hide the tunnel again, even though he thinks the Snake's Uprising is a bit ridiculous. He's not going to contribute any further to them being found out by just leaving this obvious tunnel there, so he covers it back up with the shelf. Then he heads off into the sub-basement, kind of struggles his way through the darkness for a while, but eventually he finds the retirees being led by Tax, just like they were in book one, remember the retirees are all the speakers who have been blinded and kind of just left to slowly rot down in the sub-basement here of Torchsire Library. Pardon me. And as Baz finds them, they are singing a funeral dirge for Gar. Remember, Tax apparently writes songs, or at least composes songs, in the languages of destruction, creation, and influence, that the retirees sing. This funeral dirge is being sung in destruction, which seems kind of fitting. It's kind of a mournful song, sad and angry all at once. And, Baz notes this kind of mystical effect that Tax's music sometimes seems to have on him. And, he's kind of pulled into the music, right? He starts singing along until his voice is raw, and he realizes he's crying along with the rest of the other speakers too over Gar's death. And as the song kind of finally fizzles out, it's just kind of like a raw burst of emotion here, right? Almost kind of like the Klingon death howl, right? Maybe I had suggestions of that floating around in my mind when I wrote this scene here. But as the singing subsides, Baz realizes the anger he does feel at Gar having had to die alone in the dark. None of them should have to. None of them should have to, have that fate hovering over them. Baz kind of notes that's like how all speakers live their lives, fearing the day when they're blinded and thrown into the sub-basement to, live out a dark remainder of their lives. And this is just building up or intensifying Baz's internal conflict here about whether, taking such an extreme stand against the readers, basically killing the readers, is it right? Is killing ever the right answer? And I don't think I don't have the answer to that question. I'm just, flagging these issues for consideration here. But, in this moment, Baz is feeling the anger of the other retirees, and he dwells on some other injustices that they are subjected to. We learn that, some of the retirees are, they've done something that, rightly or wrongly would generally subject them to a death sentence. But apparently Duke Octavian likes to blind them first and throw them into the darkness and let them live in uncertainty, wondering when the executioner's blade is finally going to fall. So that's some cruelty right there. He doesn't just kill them, but he makes them wait in dread for the execution to come after they've been maimed. But we also learn that other retirees just kind of disappear for no apparent reason. So now that raises some question marks. Where are these other retirees going? Maybe, maybe we just don't know, why they were sent down there, and the Duke finally decides it's time for them to meet their end. But we don't know at this point why that happens, and that's why the retirees don't really, they get together for these songs, but Baz notes they kind of quickly disperse after that, and they don't want to get too attached to one another because, if you make friends with someone, they could just not be there the next day. Tax is apparently safe from this fate, though. Of course, safe is in quotation marks because Tax's situation is not the best. But apparently the Duke uses him for breeding, which, another low here. But remember, Tax is what they call a tri. Tri as in Tri, because he can call power from all three of the languages of the Trinity. Remember, Baz is a destroyer. He's not suited to speaking creation or influence spells. He's focused on blowing stuff up. But Tax apparently has this innate ability to draw power from all three languages of the Trinity. So the Duke keeps him around, hoping, I guess, he's going to create more speakers with that power in the future. And kind of just driving home very literally here, because this idea of using a person for breeding, it degrades the individual down to like the level of just an animal. And apparently that is how the readers think of speakers. Baz notes that he once saw kind of an inventory of Torchsire assets and noted that the speakers were listed right beside the livestock on that inventory Baz saw, which is actually a real life thing that I got inspiration for again. That was something from the Haitian slave revolution, how some plantation owners did list their slaves kind of along with the other animals they had on the plantation. So again, kind of another despicable practice here, and just another one of the many injustices that the speakers are subjected to here. And maybe we see Baz, we're slowly seeing Baz maybe come around to the idea that something really does have to be done here, that maybe an uprising is necessary, however hopeless he perhaps thinks such an uprising would be. Okay, so after that, the retirees kind of disperse, and Baz and Tax have they get together, and Baz kind of, he opens the conversation by, well, Tax, you're not going to believe this, but there's a tunnel over there that leads to all the other libraries, and Tax is like, yeah, I know. And Baz says, what do you mean you know? And it kind of comes out that, well, Tax knows. He knows about the snakes, and he, in fact, is the all-seeing one who the snakes were referencing. So Tax is actually involved in this rebellion, which kind of takes Baz aback, right? Two chapters ago, Baz was saying, like, oh, I need to stay away from this all-seeing one. I hope I don't meet him. But it's actually his own brother. So for the first time, we're actually seeing the development of a bit of a conflict here between him and his brother, because obviously, even if Baz is maybe beginning to come around to the idea of a rebellion, he's certainly not on board with this idea to poison the water supply. It's murder, Tax. It's war, Baz. They're butting heads here on what the proper tactic would be. And Tax makes some good points here, right? The reader, what Baz is saying, well, Tax is like, well, that's exactly what the readers want us to think, Baz. They want us to think this situation is hopeless. But you're the one who discovered it. Their power is all based on lies. They're not actually any better than us. In fact, we could learn to read, and this division of reader and speaker is just a big lie. Readers could become speakers too if they just took the time to kind of foster this innate power that everyone has inside them. Remember, we learned back in part 1 when Baz was speaking to Tessa in undertone that maybe some people are born more naturally attuned to the spoken books and being able to draw power from them and the elements, and those are the people who end up being turned into speakers because they don't necessarily need to practice. They can kind of draw power naturally. But just because some people are born with a slightly more ability doesn't mean that others can't come to learn the ability as well. So again, it's a lie that speakers are really anything special in society, but it is a lie that has been perpetuated for hundreds of years now, and that really supports readers' dominance over the speakers by saying, well, the speakers are this small, unique subset that's dangerous to society, and they have to be controlled. And Tax is like, well, we need a leader to act in the face of that nameless and undefined idea of terror that the readers have instilled in us. And originally Baz thinks, well, oh, so you're that leader, Tax? A little skeptical, but I think there's maybe some mixed messaging here from Tax. On the one hand, Tax does seem to think that he is this leader, but we also learn that he's the one who's been spreading these rumors, about Baz, about how he tamed a dragon and flew it to Tome and some of these other things, that Baz is the one who completed the trials. And I guess they're rumors, but they're true too, right? Baz just doesn't want them getting out. So who does Tax actually think should be the leader? Because remember, Tax told the snakes to listen to Baz too. So, Tax obviously has a bone to pick with the readers, but he's also kind of, he's creating a bit of a cult of personality around Baz here as well, kind of building him up. So, it's going to be interesting to see how that develops here over the course of this book and subsequent books as well. And part of that mixed messaging, remember, because on the one hand, Tax told the snakes to listen to Baz, but then he's like, well, I'll go tell the snakes to stand down until you return, Baz. Again, Baz is actually a little ticked about that one. It's like, well, I thought you told the snakes to listen to me. But then Tax is going, well, the implication here as well, but they really need me to tell them what to do, little brother. So, again, does Tax think he should be the leader of this rebellion, or is it his brother, or what? And Tax is a little harsh here too. You can see how hard he is. He's not afraid to. He's clearly not afraid to do some killing, right? Whereas Baz is certainly hesitant to carry out this plot to kill a bunch of people. But Tax does. He kind of threatens to remove his blindfold, right, to kind of give Baz an obvious reminder of the reader's injustice. Remember, Tax had his eyes ripped out because Deliritus discovered that Tax was able to read, I guess more than 10 years ago now from where we are in the story's timeline. But Baz stops him because obviously this reminder still upsets him. Because remember, Baz still kind of blames himself a little for what happened. Because he's kind of the one, and Baz was only 8 when this happened. So rightly or wrongly, probably wrongly, but Baz does blame himself. He kind of messed up a spell, which kind of caused a chain reaction, and Baz also kind of opened his mouth when Tax may have been able to cover up Deliritus' discovery of Tax's ability to read, and that all ended up leading to Tax being blinded. But yeah, Baz references this terror of his childhood has never fully left him. But kind of harsh here because presumably Tax understands how Baz feels about this, but he still threatens to reveal his empty eye sockets, to Baz here. And he's like, well, Baz, you need to stop acting like you're the only one who's ever suffered such a horror. So again, kind of, again, like I said at the beginning of our discussion of this chapter 9, intensifying this internal conflict that Baz is having. Can he really keep denying involvement in a rebellion when he has such a stark reminder of these injustices that the readers submit to the speakers to? So again, we do not have an answer at this point, but certainly there's lots of evidence popping up that Baz isn't going to be able to keep himself out of the rebellion forever. And then Baz and Tax part ways without really resolving most of the conflict between them, though, they're still brothers, though, right? Be safe, little brother, Tax says as Baz departs. And then, of course, Baz climbs the stairs up to the main level of the library, and then this guard rushes past, nearly runs into Baz. And he shouts, "The Harbors are fighting!" And Baz kind of runs after him, curious to see what happens. Which leads right to chapter 10. Baz follows the guard to the Torchsire dining hall. Also, what do you think, what does it mean that Baz breaks into a run following the guards after he hears that the Harbors are fighting? I don't. Let's hold that thought for a minute until we get to the end. But why does Baz kind of frantically break into that run there? But okay, he follows the guard to the Torchsire dining hall, which is only a third full, right? Well, it's only a third. I guess I should say I have a third full here in my notes, but really what it says in the book is, the whole library is gathered and it only takes up a third of the dining hall. So this serves to remind us that, one, Torchsire is one of the smaller libraries, but they also apparently used to be larger, which makes sense, right? Because their namesake was Acktus Trials, who was really one of the readers after the burning who founded the triumvirate and this form of government and the separation of powers that the land of oration follows today. So it makes sense that at some point Torchsire was larger, but it is kind of at least it was a struggling library before Deliritus won the trials and brought some wealth back to the library. So when Baz gets into the dining hall, which by the way, he's not supposed to be in the dining hall, right? What's the quote? I don't have the book open, but it's like, bringing a speaker to dinner is like wearing work boots to the table. Not expressly prohibited, but not good form. So again, just another, kind of offhand reference to, comparing speakers to boots. So again, not flattering for the speakers. But Farston is standing up talking. Just to set the scene here, I think we've got I wrote it, so I know. We've got a bunch of tables out, and then there's the kind of the table of honor up at the front of the room, where Deliritus and Duke Octagonal and Duke Farston are seated, and Farston is addressing the assembled Torchsire readers. He references this person called Devonstair, who we don't really know who that is at this point, but some sort of mythological figure, it sounds like. Farston is going on about how Devonstair, he defied his rightful king, and now the warriors, who are the rebels from Fortune, are using him as like kind of their symbol of inspiration. And obviously, Farston has a negative view of this, so he views this Devonstair, whoever he was, as kind of a fiend or a villain type character. Of course, I'm sure the warriors have a different perspective of that, which we will learn later in the story. But for now, just kind of keep this in mind. This is the first reference we've seen to this Devonstair person. Farston also makes a quick reference that he has lived through the death of a loved one. So maybe just a tidbit of backstory for Farston there, but just store that away for later reference as well. But Farston kind of wraps up his speech rather quickly once Baz arrives, and he gives Deliritus an opportunity to address the assembly, kind of pumping him up a little as, your library's trials victor. And Baz notes apparently Deliritus is actually pretty good at public speaking. He has been undergoing education to be the leader of the library one day, since he is Duke Octagonal's heir. So it kind of makes sense that he'd be good at public speaking. And he, addresses the crowd briefly and gets some cheers out of them. And this, of course, annoys Baz because, Deliritus is able to accept praise for, quote, winning the trials, and he looks good while doing it, even though Baz knows it's just all a lie. I guess you do wonder, is Baz a little jealous that Deliritus is getting all the credit when Baz is the one who did all the work? I don't know. It's an interesting question. Maybe a little. I think Baz is just more upset with. I feel like I've way overused the word injustice on this episode, but I think it's just another reminder of Baz isn't necessarily looking to be held up as a hero. He doesn't really want the adoration of readers. He does not like the readers, but on the other hand, the fact that Deliritus is getting all this praise for something he did not actually do, it's like rubbing the unfairness of Baz's situation in his face here. So I think that's more along the lines of where Baz is at, not necessarily jealous. So Baz actually almost storms out, because apparently there aren't any harbors fighting when Baz gets to the dining hall. But then Farston kind of interrupts Deliritus a little here and says, he's got some entertainment planned for this evening. And what is that entertainment? Well, apparently him and Deliritus were having a nice little conversation over lunch about who the greatest fighter in Erstwhile is. And of course, Deliritus says that he thinks it was Rox, or thinks it is Rox. And Farston's like, oh, that's interesting, because I think my own harbor is the best fighter in Fortune. Well, why don't we settle this with, a little battle between harbors and give some entertainment to the library this evening? Apparently that was, this is Farston's plan. And we do I speak the English good. We note some of Farston's passive-aggressive use of his power here, right? So it's a duel between the harbors, which Baz does note this is a popular form of entertainment, so that isn't necessarily too far out of the ordinary. But Farston kind of sets these rules that they don't seem to be standard rules. So one, they're going to use real weapons, right? So, normally you don't actually have your harbors killing each other in these duels. They use kind of the fake training weapons, but, it's the first to 3 cuts, and, cuts means you're actually using steel, not fake weapons. And then there's this thing about mortality, where I guess if you're using real weapons, well, usually the person who owns the harbor gets to call mortality, because you get to decide whether you're going to risk your own harbor once he gets injured or not. But Farston's like, oh, well, no, and this seems to be a lie based on how everyone reacts. But he's also putting Deliritus in a situation where he will look like a coward if he doesn't accept. But he's like, well, oh, you let the owner of the harbor call mortality? Well, I guess some of the lesser libraries in Fortune do that, implying that Deliritus is maybe going to be viewed as a coward if he does not accept Farston's terms here. So the thing with having the opponent call mortality is, well, on the one hand, so mortality is kind of like throwing in the towel in a boxing match, right? If the coach or the manager, I don't know who, the trainer, I guess, I don't know. I'm not exactly sure what the term in boxing is, but if the guy in your corner throws in the towel, that's like saying, okay, we forfeit, it's over. So mortality is kind of the same way, except you're banking on your opponent's person to throw in the towel for you in the rules that Farston has laid out. So you can see 2 negatives here. One, you could kind of throw in the towel for the other person at like the merest thing. So it's like, oh, you got a scratch on the arm that could become infected and die. We're going to call mortality. But on the other hand, if you've got a cruel person on the other side, they could just refuse to call it, right? Even so, if the harbor is clearly wounded severely, he could still refuse to call mortality. So that's the situation Farston has put Deliritus into. I don't know that I have too much to say about the fight itself. I hope you liked the fight scene, but what we get out of this is really that Farston's harbor is better than Rock's, right? Which maybe comes as a bit of a surprise, but Rock's is well versed in how to use his razor, but apparently Farston's harbor was trained by Hinan Vanjo, who is the leader of the Indomitable Army, which we'll read more about later. Apparently a sword master. So Rox is good, but he can't stand up to someone who's received personal tutelage from this apparently famous sword master from Fortune. So Rox does get a hit in, right? So he doesn't get shut out, but for the third and final strike, Rox has lost some blood, and he trips, and then he basically gets impaled by Farston's harbor and collapses. Thankfully, never fear, Rox is not going to die. We do have magical healing in the world of oration, and Deliritus was apparently anticipating this because he brought Delida with him, right? Remember, Delida is his creator, so she is able to speak healing spells. But we see Baz, Baz rushes to Rox's side after he collapses, and Deliritus is like, what are you doing here? Baz? But I think we so circling back to that question I posed at the beginning of chapter 10, Baz, whether he wants to admit it to himself or not, cares about Rox, right? He has some concern for him. He rushes to Rox's side when he sees him go down. So Rox is healed, but then he goes to sleep, or at least passes out, and we see kind of Deliritus's care for Rox. He bundles up his cloak and puts it under Rox's head like a pillow, and then Farston comes over and kind of rubs it in to Deliritus. Well, I guess maybe I shouldn't say that, not rubs it in, but we see kind of Farston's motive here, kind of cowing Deliritus. Establishing his superiority over him. He tells Deliritus, you thought your security strong as stone, but really it was built upon a foundation of glass. impressive in the light of day, but likely to shatter when tested by the dark of reality. I trust you'll remember that in the days to come. So, Farston is acting like the gracious guest here, but, privately we really see he is just trying to cow Deliritus. It's like, I'm your superior, boy, and, now I have emphasized that. Farston also reminds us, too, Rox is going to be tired after being healed from such a grievous wound, so is Farston trying to kind of destroy Deliritus' defenses here? And if so, what's his end game? We don't know yet, but it seems that Farston has some sort of plan in mind here, and obviously we'll want to be looking out for what that is in the chapters to come. Also, we get this quick reminder that Farston has some interest in Baz. Again, we don't really know what that's all about at this point, but he also makes a point of turning to Baz. I look forward to our impending time on the road, speaker. Again, which is just odd because generally a reader wouldn't even address a speaker at all. I think like Octavianal said earlier, maybe he didn't say exactly this, but it's like, it'd be like talking to your chair. They're just property. You don't talk to property. So it is interesting how much of an interest Farston seems to have in Baz. And then we kind of roll on to the end of the chapter. Farston walks away, and Baz is like, "Oh, Deliritus, what are you getting us into, taking us on a trip with this guy?" And then Deliritus drops his bomb and says, "Farston knows I didn't complete the Acktus Trials." And that's how Chapter 10 and Part 1 of Declaimer's Discovery concludes. But obviously that's pretty serious, right? Because obviously this Duke Farston is a very important person. That he is the Duke of, presumably, one of the most powerful libraries in Fortune, since it's the library that was founded by Liamina Fortune, one of the scribes. And he's also the chair of the Triumvirate Congress, so a very important person. And if he knows that Deliritus didn't complete the trials, that probably means that he knows about Baz, too. So this is just bad news all around. So we're going to see where this goes from here. Okay, so that is this week's episode. Homework for next week. We'll be reading Chapter 11. What do you mean he knows our secret? That's the quote on the back of the physical book, and we now see what that means. After Deliritus has revealed that Farston knows he didn't complete the Acktus Trials. What do you mean, Deliritus? And then we also see this excursion to Fortune Deliritus and Baz are about to go on. They get a new participant. They're going to have a new travel companion. Who is that, and what potential issues does that raise? And Duke Octavianal, he is scheming. We'll see his gears turning in Chapter 11. So look out for all of that, and we'll read Chapter 11 on next week's episode. That brings us to our quote, and unfortunately, I didn't prepare a fantasy quote of the week this week, or an accompanying essay. Like I said, I literally got home Thursday night, right before the newsletter comes out Friday morning. So we'll be back to normal fantasy quotes of the week and essays next week. But I did pull a quote out of Declaimer's Stand, Part 4 of the Spoken Books Uprising, which just came out. So a little shameless plug here, but I like this one. This is from Rox in Declaimer's Stand. Blood may be thicker than water, but it's useless once spilled. True family are the ones who remain there for you, no matter how many spills you take. I like that because I think that's an ongoing theme throughout the whole series too. What exactly is family? And I just thought that was a nice way to put it. In nice planned words of the typical blood is thicker than water quote, maybe turning it on its head a little. I'd love to hear what you think about that, or if you have read Declaimer's Stand, let me know what you think of that too. Shoot me an email, dtkane@dtkane.com, and consider leaving a review of it on Amazon and Goodreads and wherever else you read books. I don't believe you actually have to have purchased the book from a particular retailer to leave a review of it. Certainly, if you do at a specific place, don't violate any terms or conditions or terms of service or anything like that. But I don't think you do, and it does help me out if you leave reviews of my books. So if you're looking to, give me a little boost, leave reviews of Declaimer Stand and all the other books in the Spoken Books Uprising, everywhere you can. That'll help me out greatly. So thank you for that. Check out Declaimer Stand, or if you haven't quite gotten to part 4 yet, you can read, we're reading along with Declaimer's Discovery here right now. Declaimer's Flight is part 3 of the Spoken Books Uprising, so consider picking one of those up. Or just keep tuning into the podcast, where we will be reading all of these books for free, one chapter at a time. So as always, thank you very much for listening, and until next time, this has been D.T. Kane's Epic Fantasy Book Club. Thanks for listening to D.T. Kane's Epic Fantasy Book Club. If you liked today's episode, please consider rating and reviewing wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and hit that subscribe button and the bell so you get notified whenever new episodes become available. If you'd like to listen to back episodes or review the show notes, visit dtkane.com/podcast. D.T. Kane's novels are available for purchase at most major online retailers, or you can purchase directly from his website at www.dtkane.com/books. You can receive a free short story and sign up for D.T. Kane's mailing list at dtkane.com/email-signup. If you'd like to connect, you can find D.T. Kane on Facebook at D.T. Kane Author, or Twitter at D.T. Kane Author, or send D.T. Kane an email at dtkane@dtkane.com. See you next week.